Hello everybody, it's Glenn Depke here to discuss with you a bit about the pain of inflammation today. So maybe the first thing to start with is even some questions. Because really, is chronic inflammation really an issue for you? And so you just, as you're reading this and listening to what I have to say, just pay attention to how this resonates in your own life. So recognize, does it take you a bit to get moving in the morning? So when you wake up and you're trying to get out of bed, is it tough to get the body moving? Are the first few steps really kind of agonizing and slow moving? Do you feel regular aches and pains on a regular basis? Are you stiff getting up from your desk? So if you're sitting at your desk for an hour or so and you get up, is it just tough even standing up, just feeling stiff? Do you have any challenges with chronic disease states that you're dealing with currently? Do you feel that your belly is bloated consistently? Has weight gain been a recent issue for you? Or just overall, do you feel this chronic level of fatigue or frustration? Well, if you've answered yes to any of those or more than one of those, chronic inflammation is likely an issue for you. And did you know that most with chronic inflammation are not diagnosed until really the inflammatory state is completely out of hand? And this is why it's so important to recognize these earlier stages of chronic inflammation, because we don't want to wait until this is really out of control for you. And also recognizing that approximately 116 million Americans suffer with chronic pain. All right, so that's about a third of our country. And let's also recognize that the chronic pain is I was going to say always, but we don't want to give an always anything, but it's almost always tied into chronic inflammatory states. And these are the things that people just don't recognize. They don't associate their pain with their inflammation, and as we'll talk about later, even with their triggers. And so looking at different symptoms tied into chronic inflammation. And what I did here, this complete symptom list, but what I did is I highlighted in red those that I see in my client base on a regular basis. So I see clients consistently with acid reflux or heartburn, GERD, allergies, food sensitivities, cancer, celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition tied into gluten sensitivity, chronic pain, diabetes, autoimmunity, people with eczema, which is a form of autoimmunity, fibromyalgia, heart disease, high blood pressure, insulin resistance, obesity, different levels of joint pain or arthritis or rheumatoid arthritis, metabolic syndrome, which is also known as syndrome X, osteoporosis, and the list goes on as basically symptoms tied into chronic inflammation. And what's important here is that most people just don't recognize that inflammation is really at the core of many chronic ailments that we live with today. So that's why this is so and to address properly. So the one thing that I don't want to get too complex in a short video here, but we want to define chronic inflammation, and it's typically defined as an NF-kappa beta state. All right, so a lot of times people ask me, well, what is NF-kappa beta? And I'll tell them, well, nuclear factor kappa beta, which really doesn't really say much of anything to anybody. But just to recognize what this is all about, it's tied to a protein complex that controls the transcription of DNA. Obviously, DNA transcribing is very important for your health. It's really found in all cell types, and it's involved in different cellular responses and stimuli such as stress, cytokines, free radicals, and antigens in your body. And it really controls the expression of genes, encoding the pro-anti-inflammatory cytokines, the chemokines, adhesion molecules, different enzymes and growth factors. And basically, chronic elevated NF-kappa beta is linked to cancer, inflammatory conditions, and autoimmunity. But that's when it gets out of control. We want to catch it before you get out of control, which is really the key. And so a big part of this is really recognizing also the triggers for inflammation. The main inflammatory triggers are nutritional, tied into, as it says SAD on here, which stands for the acronym for the Standard American Diet, high in sugar and processed foods. Food intolerance, or really food sensitivity, is probably one of the biggest challenges. I see food sensitivity in my client base on a consistent basis, and it's always leading to chronic inflammatory states. GI challenges such as infections, different pathogens, whether these be parasites, protozoa, amoebas, entamoebas, H. pylori, detrimental bacteria, and the list goes on. Stress, chronic mental and emotional stress is another major inflammatory trigger. And then also beyond that, obesity is an inflammatory trigger, and that's interesting enough because inflammation creates obesity, and obesity creates more inflammation. We'll learn about that a little bit later. Chemotherapy and addiction. So these are the inflammatory triggers, and the ones in bold are the more primary inflammatory. So when we talked about the NF-kappa beta getting out of control, we're looking at 4 different feedback loops here. And then this is what's so important to understand, because there's so many people who feel like they're dealing with inflammation. You might be taking some omega-3 fatty acids and dealing with your triggers and maybe supporting adrenal function, things that I actually do with my clients. But once you have a chronic inflammatory state and you're in what is known as the NF-kappa beta state, you have these 4 different feedback loops that really create more inflammation. So they feed inflammation. And we've got increased fat cells, leaky gut, hepatic disruption, and also cytokine release. We're going to talk a bit about those individually. All right, so the first one is an increase in fat cell production. So when you have chronic inflammation, your body just makes more fat cells. Now, an increase in fat cells leads to insulin resistance, insulin surges, which then creates more inflammation. So just one of those. Now, another feedback loop is inflammation creates a breakdown in the tight junctures within your small intestine. So this tight junction breakdown leads to leaky gut. Leaky gut, which really should be referred to as leaky small intestine, because that's what it really is. But it allows whole food particles to get through the small intestines and into your blood, which creates an immune system activation, thus more inflammation in your. And now also this NF-kappa beta state will create a suppression of what's referred to as a cytochrome P450, basically which leads to a hepatic or a liver biotransformation challenge, which creates activated liver end products. And then when you add environmental triggers to that, which we're all exposed to, then we get, you guessed it, more. And then lastly, when you have an NF-kappa beta state, it creates an immune cell activation, which then creates a cytokine release. And cytokines are a necessary and essential aspect of our immune system, but we don't want them too low and we don't want them too high, because when we have too high of a cytokine release, it creates a self-amplifying loop, which actually then creates, as you guessed it, more inflammation. And even beyond that, so I first want you to recognize how important it is when you're dealing with inflammation. Yes, you want to deal with the triggers. Yes, you want to be on something that's an anti-inflammatory protocol. But if you're really going to properly help your body alleviate or completely eliminate inflammation and the pain associated with that, then you have to address those 4 triggers also, because if you don't, those feedback loops just lead right back into more. And now there's one other special note I want to make with chronic inflammation. I just think this is important for so many people suffering on different levels nowadays. So that chronic NF-kappa beta response also creates an immune system dysregulation. And you can see by the slide, this creates 3 different challenges in the body. So on the left and the right, one is multiple chemical sensitivity. So these are people who have a tough time, sitting next to somebody who has perfume or cologne on, or you walk in a room that was freshly painted and you have to run out as quick as possible, or a new carpet, or any different type of like really extreme chemical stimulant is created by this. All right, the other on the right is tied into autoimmunity. If there's immune dysregulation, eventually that leads to autoimmune states, and that list is long. It could be anything from rheumatoid arthritis to MS to type 1 diabetes, Hashimoto's, brain autoimmunity, eczema, psoriasis. The list just goes on and on about what your immune system can attack when it's not regulated properly. But the other one that I think is a key to pay attention to also is immune dysregulation cuts out the system which is referred to as apoptosis. Now, just to understand, apoptosis is basically a system of cellular suicide, is the basic way I like to explain it. So when one of the cells of your body becomes a broken cell, it's designed to die. It's designed to commit suicide. Right? So when a cell is broken, it should just die off. Right? And that's the system of apoptosis. But when apoptosis is not functioning properly due to immune system dysregulation, then when a broken cell becomes a broken cell, it perforates into another broken cell and another and another and another. And over time, that is then your diagnosis of cancer. Yeah, so, and this is a lot of times I do a talk, called "Did you turn on the cancer switch?" Is really turning off apoptosis and creating a chronic inflammatory and an NF-kappa beta state in your system. So I want you to recognize the severity, of inflammation, but also recognizing that regardless of where you are in a chronic inflammatory state, it can be dealt with properly. So then the other aspect, tied directly into the title, is really in the pain of inflammation. Because that's what people feel. When you have inflammation, you feel pain. Now there's inflammatory triggers which are tied obviously into this chronic inflammatory state or the NF-kappa beta. And when you are in this state, you produce neurotransmitters referred to as bradykinin. Bradykinin is the expression of pain in your body. So if you have this neurotransmitter, you're going to feel pain. And so we don't want to look at the bradykinin as the issue. We want to look back at the inflammation as the issue. But really with the pain of inflammation program, we go back even further. We look at the triggers as really the issue. Because honestly, it's not the inflammation is what's wrong. It's that something is occurring in your life that's creating the inflammation, which is leading to the NF-kappa beta state, which is then creating the neurotransmitter bradykinin, which is then the experience of pain. So that's the one thing here at Depke Wellness. We're always looking to get back to the core so you can actually do what you need to do on the most simplest levels to help eliminate or substantially reduce these challenges in your life. So then what do you do now? So the pain of inflammation program is really tied into many different phases. This is ties into your entire gut-brain connection. I want you to understand that your gut and your brain are not two different systems. They're a system that works together. And we know this because 90% of your brain output goes right down the vagus nerve, through the spinal column, into the nervous system tissue in the gut, and comes right back up. So when you have a gut problem, you have a brain problem. When you have a brain problem, you have a gut problem. You cannot separate them. This is why often so many people have food sensitivities. They say, well, I don't feel anything. If I eat that food that is supposed to be bad for me or a challenge for me, I don't really feel anything. But when you start asking and they say things like, well, I don't really have good mental clarity. I don't regulate moods very well. I don't have really good coping mechanisms. I seem to not be able to memorize like I used to. Well, that could be that, yes, it's affecting your gut, but it's really showing up more as a brain symptom, or it could be the other way around. The other part of the pain of inflammation program is to help regulate your immune system. Because if you don't get regulation in your immune system, we already saw what that leads to with multiple chemical sensitivities, the shutting down of apoptosis, and also autoimmunity. So that's a big key. The other aspect is to actually utilize some powerful anti-inflammatories with proper dosing. Now, this is one of the big challenges I see across the board with people who come visit Depke Wellness that have tried anti-inflammatory protocols elsewhere with little or no success. Because typically they're not using something that's really what I would maybe say is aggressive enough, or they don't dose properly. You can't play around with an NF-kappa beta state. You've got to be aggressive, but at the same time you have to deal with the 4 different feedback loops that are feeding the inflammation. So the other part of the program is also the phase 1 and phase 2 liver detoxification. So essential to clear the liver and to create a decongested effect on the liver, because most people's livers are congested and sluggish and creating a lot of these other issues with inflammatory states. And obviously the elimination of inflammatory foods and triggers are such a key. And so now part of this is where I like to really always share my story with this. Because it goes back to I'm 50 right now. But back when I was 17, I injured my knee in a football accident injury, And since then, from the time I was 17 until into my mid to late 40s, somewhere in there, I just lived with this chronic inflammation. Yeah, so if I would do things like go walk 9 holes on the golf course, or work out and do legs that day, or even just run like down the block, my knee would inflame and I would be in pain. And if I was walking the 9 holes of golf, the pain would really be a bit excruciating. But I also knew that I had an old injury. I know based on x-rays that I have severe degeneration in my medial knee and moderate degeneration in the rest. So I'd really kind of accepted the fact that I'm always going to have this pain and this inflammation. Yeah, but when I first went through the program that I'm talking about here, I actually dealt with my body's systemic inflammatory processes, the big shock for me is my knee pain went away. Now, I didn't even think that was possible. It wasn't even in the realm of possibility going to this program. I was really doing this just to overall improve my health and wellness and my happiness. But when my knee pain went away, and I can now go and play 9 holes of golf and walk, and I can go work out and I can do these things, and I don't have that pain. Now, here's the big thing to recognize. Of course, I still have severe degeneration in my medial knee and moderate degeneration in the rest, but I don't have the inflammation, so I'm not producing the bradykinin, so I'm not living in pain. So that's something that I think is almost to the music of ears of so many people, and just recognizing that dealing with the inflammation really goes a long way in helping many levels of your health, and definitely with the response of pain. So potential benefits of the pain of inflammation program is, number one, the reduction or elimination of pain. To create an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, to reestablish the connection between your gut and your brain. To deal with any gastrointestinal tract healing that's needed. So whether this be an anti-parasitic, antifungal, or an anti-yeast aspect of the protocol. To support your immune system. You need to get back regulation in your immune system function. Liver detoxification and drainage. Weight loss if needed. So some people need to lose weight. Some people, because of their chronic inflammation, actually need to gain weight. Because that's one thing to think about. Is there's a syndrome, if I'm remembering the name correctly, Katakechkin syndrome, where there's this uncontrollable and unhealthy loss of not only muscle mass but also body fat. So this is whether we need to lose or gain weight. How about increasing your energy, improving your digestive function, improving your sleep habits, really waking up ready to rock and roll and take on the world, or balancing your emotions, or just overall wellness. And here's just a few short little testimonials. There's others that you can read on the website also, but here's one where virtually, and these are just little tidbits taken out of larger testimonials. So this one, where virtually all of my less than healthy conditions that I identified at the beginning of the program simply disappeared or greatly diminished. Think about that. How would you like to say that? I would, doesn't it sound like just awesome to be able to say, oh wow, most of my unhealthy conditions disappeared or greatly diminished? Or how about another testimonial? And most important to me, the joint and back pain I had been experiencing was gone. All right, let's recognize this is a 6-week program. Okay, this isn't something you're doing for the next couple of years. You're going to create some new lifestyle habits, but these people weren't waiting for a year or two for this to happen. This was 6 weeks. And this one, and Rich and all, I just want to be very candid about this. This was me. The complete unexpected benefit that the elimination of 30 years of knee pain was actually gone. All right, so those are testimonials. So basically, we're really talking about the pain of inflammation program. Right, if you're watching this on my website, there's much more text for you to read right on the website. If you're watching this via social media or some other type of media, just go to depkewellness.com and under programs and look at the pain of inflammation program. You'll get a lot more information there. Lastly, what I want to leave with you is that if you have any questions or comments before getting into the program, I encourage you to either call us or email us. So either call us at 949-954-6226. or email us at support@depkewellness.com, and Depke is DEPKE wellness.com. Because really, if you're going to commit to this program, I want you to be really assured for yourself that you're fully committing. Right? It is a rather rigid and heavy supplemental program, and there is also a significant nutritional component to following an anti-inflammatory diet for 6 weeks. But if you're ready and if you're committed to doing something different for 6 weeks, that, as some of the testimonials can say, could eliminate pain, or greatly diminish or completely alleviate health symptoms you're dealing with, that's worth it. But I really want you to make sure and really be fully committed. I don't want you to think this is only a supplement program, so you can just take supplements and do everything the same. I don't want you to think that it's only a nutritional program, because really, if you were just working through the nutrition itself, based on those feedback loops, it's not going to work. And also, if you want to just take the supplements and think that that's going to work, that doesn't work either, because you have to remove the triggers. Okay, and so with all of that, just thank you for taking time out of your day and allowing me to share information on the pain of inflammation. I am Glenn Depke from Depke Wellness for yourself and wellness for the world, and I thank you.